Well, maybe I'll wait a few minutes just for that clock to catch up. I have 6:01 on my computer here, but I'll feel a lot better if all the clocks say.
I have 6:01.
Yours says 6:05?
Yeah.
I have 6 o'clock sharp. There we go.
Well, maybe I'll wait a few minutes just for that clock to catch up. I have 6:01 on my computer here, but.
Okay.
I always love watching it delay.
Did you get
Do we have
the
a
message
sign-in
about
sheet?
having
I didn't even
water
look.
or having the
Maybe it's over there.
Levee History go back further?
Yeah, I think it's by the public comment
Couldn't
sign.
fit it on there. I just, yeah.
Okay, that's fine, no worries.
So,
There's only so much room.
yeah. It doesn't-
Well, if you want to
doesn't-
read it.
It doesn't look good, but I mean, I'll put it on the web with the whole thing. And,
Okay,
I guess we could have put multiple pages in there, but.
yeah, it's fine, okay.
Okay, well, I'll call this meeting to order at 6:02, Thursday, December 9th, 2021. And this is our Truth in Taxation meeting. This is a time for the public to, give comment on the levy and the budget to the commissioners. In attendance, we also have County Administrator James Yorkie, County Auditor Treasurer Brady Powers, and then also County Assessor Bob Thompson. So we should be able to answer any questions. If there are questions about individual tax statements, that's going to be something that Assessor Thompson's probably going to be best able to do. If it is about just the levy and the budget at large, then we're happy to receive those. I don't know that we'll be answering questions tonight, but we can certainly get back and have a response for you in a timely manner. So only thing I would ask is to keep it cordial and civil, and clearly there's not a whole lot of people in attendance. We do have at least one written comment that we'll have read after the in-person comments, and please, whoever would like to start us off, just go to the front and sign in, and we're all ears. But not all at once.
Oh, come on, somebody.
Well, I guess I'll make a few comments. And Kaiser is my name, Dick Kaiser, my wife Becky. We have a few pieces of property at the Benton Trail and in town.
And Mr. Kaiser, if you wouldn't mind signing in too?
Oh, sure.
That'd be great, thank you.
And thank you for starting us off, too. Yep. Phone number and email? Is that needed?
Just email will be fine.
Okay. And my comment is basically general. Just what I'm looking for is to make sure Bob has enough help to cover the grounds and the country, and that everyone is treated equitably, fairly, and no lopsidedness in anything, and get things looked at. So I assume now, I think this is the year, I think by 5 years, you're going to be doing the Gunflint Trail again, right, Bob? Yep. So, I mean, we've had our little issues. I've worked in lands quite a bit in my life and talked with Bob when we've had
problems, concerns, and we've been able to iron those out, and I think we can continue to do that. But now being a full-time resident up here, I'd like to at least show up and get the comments out there, and, you know, and want to be cordial, and want to work together and work with people. So it's just very short and sweet. I don't have any real rhubarb. I just want to make sure everything's working along. With that, I'll let someone else come forth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, good evening. My name is Ken Rindall. I've recently acquired the family property up off of County Road 56, just off the Gunflint. And I've looked back at the valuations of the property over the last 10 years and walked through it with my parents, and did see an incremental increase, which is expected as an ownership. I'm very astute. I know a lot about the real estate industry, as I am a registered and licensed broker in Minnesota, as well as a licensed contractor in Minnesota. We're seeing some of the valuation increases in, you know, the southern part of the state due to home value increases and things of the like. But I've never seen in a potential assessed increase of nearly 70% on a piece of property where half of it is inaccessible and landlocked. So my concern is that these valuations on these properties that have been long existing in the community under my previous owner, which was my father, now that I have taken it over, all of a sudden there's this major jump in valuation in the property. And my concern is it because of the transfer of ownership? And also the percentage of the increase, not so much on the levy portion of it, because I pulled up some information on the state. The 4.9% of last year, I believe it was, and the 3.9% of this year for the levies is kind of right in line with the rest of the state. But the actual assessed value of the property is nowhere near in line with what's happening in the rest of the state, especially in the metropolitan area where I do a lot of business down there. You're seeing a max of about 12 to 15% of home value taxations increases because of the home value increases, but not a 60 or a 70%, which is the assessed proposed tax increase on the two parcels that I own up there. So that's a major concern for me, which got me to drive 4 hours to come to this meeting. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you for making the drive and giving comment. Appreciate it, and hopefully we can get some of the concerns answered here.
And mine is, I guess, just based on my individual property. So I guess from what you said, I'd be better off just to talk to the assessor about that. So.
Probably. And I don't know if, it looks like Bob's got a card he can hand off for contact information there.
Yeah, did you sign in too? I
Yep.
your information. So, if you want to give me a call.
Sure.
Yep.
And I don't know if you've had a chance to talk with Assessor Thompson, Mr. Rindall yet, but.
No, I have not.
Okay. So that'll be important for him to get back to you and talk things through. And yeah, that's a concern we've been hearing about, and a trend that's certainly concerning. So, well, we also have a presentation.
Did you want the
One written copy?
Oh, yes, thank you.
I've got one too.
Oh, very good. Okay, we've got two written comments. Very good.
Mr. Chairman, I received a written comment from Mr. Don Davison, who resides at 583 South Shore Drive in Grand Marais, and he writes the following regarding the levy. He said, "In our case, your increase in the budget increases our homestead taxes by 11.7%. This is more than twice the rate of inflation and twice the COLA, that is cost of living adjustment, used this year for government indexes, including Social Security. Has the county board considered zero-based budgeting? If the county board could make the assumption that all departmental budgets are $0, then department heads would have to justify all line expenses. This would inevitably result in cost containment and presumably a lower budget. We have heard some department heads complain that they are running out of space for staff. A question that must be asked is whether all the staff are necessary for the efficient running of the department. I hope that the county board will do the fiscally responsible thing and pare back the proposed budget, even if it means cutting staff or programs. Thank you." That's the end of the comment.
Thank you, Administrator Yorkie. Thank you, Mr. Davison. And Brady, you have one as well?
Yeah, from Jan Benson she's got a property in Schroeder. She lives in St. Cloud. I referred her to you, Bob, after I looked at her parcel today, but she says, "I am writing to contest the proposed 2022 statement for my property at 9202 West Highway 61, Schroeder. The proposed tax statement shows a drop of 6.4% in property value and an increase in property taxes of about 6.8%. It's hard to justify an increase in taxes on a $33,000 drop in property value. In addition to the more than $5,300 in tax paid to Cook County, I pay Cook County businesses for snow plowing, pest control, garbage pickup, electrical repair, construction costs, power, telephone, internet, rental management, housekeeping, and maintenance. I feel the drop in property value should be accompanied by a similar drop in tax." And I just took a quick look at it, but I did refer, I gave her your number. And it's kind of clear this is one that was seasonal, and that now it's resident, non-homestead. So I did not talk to her again, I just looked it up, and so I'm sure you'll be getting a call on that, so.
So change in classification there.
Yeah, we know that when we discussed that before, that a seasonal is taxed at, or the classification is at 1%, and a non-homestead residential is 1.25%, so it's 25% higher classification, because it must be renting out.
Okay, and that's a, okay. I was gonna say, that's a different classification than residential non-homestead, right? There's,
No,
oh, that's the same, okay.
4B1, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Auditor Powers, and thank you, Ms. Benson, for your comment as well. Any other comments that commissioners have received, written comments? Okay. I haven't either, so now I guess we can move on to the presentation, and I find the presentation pretty informative. I hope you all do as well, and I don't know if this is the sort of thing we can share on the live stream, full screen, or if it's just going to be, okay. Well, I'll hand it over to you,
James,
gentlemen.
were you going to make a comment now?
Well,
or
I
after?
thought I would jump in at the.
Okay. Got it. So, this is the Budget 2022 Truth and Taxation meeting. Next screen. So this is just a timeline, just some information. You can see some assessment information and tax information. Bob, you want to talk about the sales study, that portion of it?
Sure, so you can see on the timeline there, the green circle is where we're at now.
You might want to go to the mic.
Yeah.
Just to make sure it's captured.
So on the screen, we have the timeline for proposed property taxes in 2022. I also have a video of a similar presentation on my website. If anybody is watching that's interested, they can go and check that out. You can see the green circle on the timeline is where we're at in this process. And that is after we send out the estimated tax notice after the preliminary levy is set by the Board of Commissioners in September, which is applied to the valuation that was set back in January 2021. After the value is set, it gives a period of about 6 months, roughly, to appeal and contest that value with the assessor's office. We can come out, do a physical review if there's something on the record or if there's comparable sales to take into consideration. That's the time we do that. A lot of people are a little bit confused when they see their 2022 proposed taxes and think, well, where is this big value increase I've been hearing so much about? And if you look at this, prior to the value date of January 2nd, 2021, we have our sales study period. That's the first thing in the chain of events here. So that goes from October 2019 to September 2020, and the sales that occurred during that time frame are where we establish the value for January 2nd, 2021. So I can assure people that there is another value increase coming in 2022 based off the sales we've been seeing over the last 12 months. And, you know, I've pulled up the most recent sales we've had actually since October 1st, 2020. We've now started our next sales period for values 2023. And it's staggering. I think a lot of you are familiar with what's going on in the market. There are homes that, you know, in our meeting with the department heads today, the recorder's office was citing properties that sold back in 2020. They're reselling for far more than they sold in 2020 now this year, and I can attest that is occurring. So, you know, whatever the cause that's bringing this on, there is also some additional information on the website about how when we increase values across the board, like Mr. Kaiser had referred to, it keeps that playing field level. You know, I've heard people make a reference that, you know, when tide is high, all the boats are floating. So when all the values are increasing, the tax burden is supposed to be distributed fairly. And I think that's what Mr. Kaiser was referring to, is as long as we can consistently apply those value increases and be accurate with them, that's how you're assuring that the property tax burden is distributed fairly. So that's the breakdown of this slide. And on my website, I also show the following year slide. So it shows where we're at in that process, which is we're just before that January 2nd, 2022 sale date and looking at those sales from the 12 months prior. I will say that we just looking at it today, we have 100 sales already since October 1st. So the market is booming. There have been some years that the entire sales study, we've only had 300 sales. So.
Wow.
So that just says what's on each of the slides coming up. And the next slide is just why we're here today. There's a statute that requires this meeting, requires a public meeting where the public has time to speak. The law requires the treasurer deliver a notice of proposed taxes, which I hope you all received. The taxing authorities in Cook County include the county, the school, the hospital, city, 3 towns, EDA, ARDC, state of Minnesota. So almost half of all the property taxes collected in the county are for other taxing entities, but they all show up on that statement. There's some advantages and disadvantages to property taxes as a source of local government funding. The complexity, obviously, is a disadvantage. The unfunded mandates and the taxes don't match the ability to pay at all times. There are also some advantages, such as being more responsive. You're here right now. Accountable to the public, more stable for local government functioning. And as Bob talked about their meetings in the spring, each year for the Board of Review to look at taxpayer values. And so the meetings this spring will be for the values for payable 2023, coming up this spring. The next 3 slides are just if somebody didn't have their statement or they're wondering how to read it. Just some things to note up in the box in the top. Always take a look and see if your value has changed from this year, from the previous year, and look to see whether that classification has changed. This one in the example has not. And then down below in the bulk of the statement, if you go to the next one actually, you'll see sometimes in the county line, that's where fire districts show up. Fire districts are unique taxing areas, so it's different all across the county. So you and your neighbor across the road may have a different tax because they may be in Maple Hill, you might be in the Gunflint Fire District, but that's how it works. Another example of the complexity of the tax system. Down at the bottom, you've got special taxing districts, and in Cook County, that includes our hospital. They have a levy of $1.3 million, and our EDA, they have a levy of $400,000 this year, and then there's a small levy for the ARDC, which is about $30,000, Arrowhead Regional Development Commission, and then we will be having it for the HRA. That's new also now. $125,000 for the HRA. The next slide is the proposed budget and levy that the board approved in September. And on the left, you can see the major funds, the general, highway, human services, airport, our building fund, our bond payments. The large one there's no levy involved with that. Sales tax bonds, it's paid by sales tax. We have the new HRA, a small contingency for negotiations, and a capital reserve. We set the proposed levy at 4.5% increase, and that's at red at the bottom, and the total initial levy is $11,157,253. That's $293,000 over last year's final levy. And
There, I was gonna say, there is a mic on the floor there
Yeah.
if you wanted that
Oh,
one.
there is, isn't there?
It's, I think it's right by that, yeah.
start out with your comments.
Sure, or however you want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to
ahead.
talk about some factors that went into putting together the budget for 2022. Just to remind folks who are listening, this process actually starts much earlier in the year, where we get together with department heads to talk about what they anticipate their needs will be for the next year. And so we really start putting the budget together like in the spring. And then by June, we are putting together a budget proposal to bring to the Board of County Commissioners. The thing that's notable about that, and especially in regard to this year, is that we were starting to see a little bit of inflation earlier in the year related to increases in the cost of food, fuel. As we talked about, real estate prices have been a driver, construction materials, et cetera. And so when we looked at what we thought the potential increase in cost of living, so personnel expenses are one of the biggest components of our budget. And so we were looking at what we would anticipate for cost of living adjustment for 2022. And at that point, we were seeing inflation forecasts for a 3 to 5 year period that were in the neighborhood of about 2.5%. And so that's what we included in the budget proposal that we presented to the board back at the end of July. Now, as you know, in recent months, the actual rate of inflation has gone up significantly more than 2.5%. So we're in the neighborhood of like, I think 5.5% to 6% right now, as I recall. But again, because the budget proposal gets put together earlier in the year and it gets presented to the board in July, and then by September, they have to set a preliminary budget and levy. And so a lot of these really sharp increases that have occurred this year really occurred in the very latter part of the year. And so by the time we had set the preliminary budget proposal, we were still banking on that 2.5% COLA. And so that's what's included in the budget. Brady mentioned that there's a contingency for union negotiations. We are renegotiating all 3 union contracts this year. And so the inflation rate has certainly entered into our conversations about cost of living adjustments. But again, when we started putting together the budget proposal, our proposal included information that was based on that forecast that was around 2.5%. So that's something to be aware of. The other thing that is a factor in our consideration of the 22 budget is that we are still awaiting a reappraisal of the boundary waters for which the county receives payment in lieu of taxes from the federal government. And that's not a small amount. So before the most recent reappraisal, we were getting north of $2 million for that payment. There was a reappraisal that occurred in 2019 that resulted in a 37% reduction in the estimated value of that land. And we and the other jurisdictions who are subject to receiving payment in lieu of taxes, which include Lake County and St. Louis County, were, to say the least, not very happy with that reappraisal. And so we have requested that the U.S. Forest Service reconsider its appraisal. We've had conversations and they've agreed, and we actually had some help from our legislative delegation at the federal level to get some reconsideration of that appraisal. And so the U.S. Forest Service is in the process of conducting a reappraisal of the boundary waters. And we're not going to know until early 2023 what the outcome of that appraisal will be. We'll have some sense around the middle of next year, but it's not going to be finalized until early 2023. So that's still a wild card. In the meantime, we've been getting the previous level of payment in lieu of taxes, with the caveat that we might have to return a portion of that at some point. And so that's not money that we're spending. We're basically setting it aside with the expectation that we may have to return it. Now, the way things are looking right now, in recent conversations with the Forest Service, I think we're getting some signals that probably the reappraisal will come in more in our favor, but again, that's still pending, so that's not money in the bank by any means. So, yes.
I got a question. I don't know if you just heard within the last day or two, the state of Minnesota has projected a $7.7 billion surplus.
I did hear that.
Not 1.6. So how would you guys take that into account for the future then?
So, well, so we're talking. This is older information, and you're right. There is now forecast to be north of a $7 billion surplus for the current biennium. But one thing that has become very clear is that these are forecasts that can change considerably over time. So that also is not money in the bank. And so this information is outdated because this slide is something that we put together before that very recent news that occurred earlier this week.
But it still leads to the same conclusion. We were afraid a year
Right.
ago that we might get cut in state programs, grants, aids, and because it was positive when we wrote this, we weren't so concerned about that. Well, now we're even less concerned.
Mhm.
But I don't know that the money's going to come, help our bottom line. It seems like there's a lot of competing interests I don't know, a final result. That'll take months, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Yep,
But at least we don't have to be concerned with it.
for sure. Yep. So other things that are affecting the budget this year, and this almost never happens, but we are actually seeing a decrease in our health insurance premiums for employees this year. And that's the result, in part, well, it's the result of two things. Number one is our utilization of health insurance for the previous 12-month period was actually lower than it was projected to be. And so that resulted in a savings to the Northeast Service Cooperative through which we get our health insurance. And so they were able to pass that savings along to us for the next calendar year. On top of that, they used some of their fund balance to add an additional 5%. So we were going to see a 4.3% decrease in health insurance premiums, but they added 5% to that. So our premiums are actually going down by 9.3% for next year. So currently the county pays for 80% of health insurance benefits, employees pay for the other 20%. So that savings goes directly to our bottom line, and that resulted in downward pressure on the budget for '22. Brady already mentioned that there is a line item in next year's budget for the new Housing and Redevelopment Authority. We're very excited about this because, as we all know, there's a shortage of affordable workforce housing in the county, and this new entity will give us a new tool to compete for federal funding for housing projects. And it'll also give us a dedicated resource in the form of the executive director of that organization and also the 5-member board that this Board of County Commissioners recently appointed. And so that work has already begun. The HRA had its first meeting last month, and we'll begin the process of recruiting an executive director in the first part of next year. So that's a big step forward in terms of our efforts to address housing.
So the next screen, with that 4.5% increase, we did have an increase in our overall market valuation and net tax capacity. That's the number that the tax rate is actually applied to. So this just shows the increase in a theoretical homestead at different values, that if they had no change in class, no change in value whatsoever, just our levy, it would be up about 1.95% instead of the 4.5% that we actually booked because of that increase. There's increase in tax value, so there is some benefit in that valuation increase to some average homeowner. The next slide is the all levy history. This is just showing all of those taxing entities and what their levy proposals were for this year, along with the counties. You can see the city of Grand Marais proposed increase of 5.96. Lutsen and Tofte with big drops, 16 and 27%. Tofte had a huge increase last year, so they're coming back to their, traditional levy. Lutsen Fire with a big drop. EDA with a substantial increase. And counties 4.5%. You put them all together, not that that affects everybody because you're in one district or another, but the average of all of them is about 3.125%. And then down at the bottom, these are the other levies, the state general property tax that seasonal and commercial pays, and that took a big drop. The state sets that level, so they got a cut of 24%. And then fiscal disparities, you'll hear more about that later. I don't think there's anybody here with commercial property, so we did a lot of preparation on that. Expecting people might be here tonight. But fiscal disparities took a huge increase, about 67% over previous year. The next screen is it's just a visual of what you just saw, just to show you the county is the big block, and then how all the other districts add up to close to half, not quite.
That's a good slide.
And then, yeah, just a nice visual. The next one, this is our levy history. Typically, I show you from 1989, just a couple years before I got here, but it doesn't fit on one of these slides very well. So it looks pretty ugly and you can't read it. So I'll put it on the website with the whole thing. But here, it's just showing about the last 12 years. It shows our levy over on the left-hand side, and you can see just how the swings have gone. If you had the other years, you'd see bigger swings yet. But here we had a 0% increase in 11. That's because of these low ones were kind of a reaction to that, the Great Recession by our county board. And then a 1.73 and a 2% and a 0. And then we had to catch up, which inevitably, if you look at the history, that's what you would see, that a lot of times boards are holding the line, and then you'll see a 25% increase. That was the biggest one in that since 1989. And in this case, it was as much as 17%. And then we dropped back again, 5.99 in 2019, 5.89. 2.99 last year, and then a proposed 4.5 this year. And then you see the actual levies each of those years in the next column. And then it just tallied up, and this is going back to 1989, just tallied up what all those levies come up to is 176 million since 1989. And then the next two columns are just a theoretical. It's like, well, what if we had just levied an even 4.36 a year? I backed into that number, but it gets you to a levy of about 11 million now. Had we just kept it steady, and had we done that, we would have collected 193 million instead of 176. And then another theoretical, well, what if we had levied less? So as to collect the same, roughly the same amount, 173 million over those years at 3.5%. Just gives you some concepts of a steady levy and what, if you used it judiciously, you might have got by with 3.5 million and done the same things you did with what we did, bouncing around. And if you did it with 4.36, you'd have a lot more money and get into the same place. Of course, you're paying that extra money. The next screen is just an analysis of, for 2 years, 2022, 2021, some statistics. On the left are just different classes of property: homestead, seasonal, non-homestead, resorts, commercial, utilities. The interesting thing on this is take a look at commercial. You see the count, 227 in 2022, and when it was 421 in 2021. And then you see across the board the percentage of tax collected for commercial, 9% versus 14. And then you can see where did those properties go, and you can see the numbers in the non-homestead residential primarily, where in 2021 they were 13%, and now they're 23%, and you see it in the count. They were 2689, and this year they're 3509, and that's, the assessor was given a memo by the Department of Revenue, and not just our assessor, all across the state essentially, but it really hit counties like ours with seasonal properties, and said that if someone is acting as though it's a commercial property, renting it a certain number of days a year, et cetera, you must put them at commercial, even though there's a new law going to go into effect that will then allow them to be put into a non-homestead residential. So So for 1 year, we had to do this, and so did all the other counties. Lake is having the same problems, and so is St. Louis and other counties in the Northeast. So we had this big swing for 1 year, well, 2 years actually, where we increased them to commercial, and now we'll be decreasing the number of commercial because of the new law and the new way that we can classify these short-term rentals. Questions on that? Okay.
Also, we should be aware of, with that increase in the commercial this past year, we might be hearing from more residents next year on the backside of that swing.
Yeah. So, in that vein, so fiscal disparities, I wish there were a couple of commercial here, but, so the basics of it, maybe the board wants to hear anyway, so.
Please.
So fiscal disparity, the whole idea is just share your commercial industrial growth among these counties, the 7 northeastern counties. They do it in the Twin Cities. They've done it since the 1970s. The legislature put it into effect up here in 1996. That's the base year. So the law says that the fiscal disparity is it's going to collect 40% of the growth since the base year, and it's going to then tax it at an area-wide rate. But it's not that simple. So it takes this 40% that increase, and that divides it by the next year's total value. The result is a fiscal disparity ratio, which is not allowed to exceed 100%, but that ratio tells you how much is taxed at the area-wide rate. So that's the average of the 7 counties. The area-wide rate is much higher than Cook County's rate. For 2022, you take the 7 counties, the area-wide rate is 174%. If you look at, just for an example, Tofte, their rate is 90%. So you can imagine if you have to tax a lot of your commercial property at the area-wide rate, you're going to get a big tax bill. Next page says, so that's in effect every year. And we've been paying a big bill to St. Louis County for years. What happened in 2022? It was this swing in commercial property because you're using 2 years. You see the 40% growth in value, that's a hard number. They actually calculate the actual number. This is in Tofte, 168. And then the total value, you have to put the total value in for 2022. The total value is less than 40% of the growth because of this big swing in the commercial value for that 1 year. So in this case, 168 over 120 is 139%. It shouldn't happen, but it did. It's limited to 100%. So we have several of these districts like Tofte, Lutzen, and then there's a few others that actually hit the 100%. They were over 100%, but they hit 100%. What that means is that all of the net tax capacity that would have been taxed for the county rate is all going into the fiscal disparity program and being taxed at 174%. So we have some huge commercial tax bills this year because of this weird, I call it weird because I don't understand why they did that. When they set this up, I assume they do the same thing in the Twin Cities, but I don't know that for certain, but I know that's the way it works here. So the lesson is that large changes in commercial value can upset the intended program. So the next screen just says it should return to normal next year. And now you can see that 120,000, which is the 2022 full value, you subtract the 1996, it was only 14,000, leaves you with 106,000 of total growth. 40% of that is 42,675. Now the total value for 2023, I'm just guessing because I don't have that information, but I said, we'll take the 120,000 and just add 3% to it, call that normal. If it is Now you got a fiscal disparity ratio of 34%, 42 over 124. That's what we typically see year to year. It might be 34, 35, 40, 42, 43. That's very typical when you don't have that big swing. So, and that's all I've got for a presentation.
Thank you, Auditor Powers. Thank you, Minister Yorkie. There's so few of us here. Any questions about the presentation? Either from the audience or the public or commissioners? Commissioner Hawkins never has questions.
I have a question about the fiscal disparities. So all the counties pay into the fiscal disparities, and it's hitting us in Lake County especially right now because of the short-term rental situation. And it will go down next year. But that money, how is it distributed?
This is really basic and simple because there's a contribution, everybody puts in, all the 7 counties put in, based on these values, and 40% and so forth. And then the money gets distributed based on their fiscal capacity. And the basic of that is what is the value per capita. And we get killed on that end of it because our per capita means people that live here year-round. Our homestead number, if you're looking at it, is pretty small. We have a lot of seasonal, a lot of non-homestead residential. So there's a lot of value here. The formulas in this program assign all that value to us that live here full-time. So we get nailed on the contribution going in, and we get nailed on the fiscal value capacity coming out. And it's more, there's probably numerators and denominators and other factors that I'm not aware of in there that also make that even more complicated, but that's the generality of it. And St. Louis County has always been a receiver of funds. We have always paid in, and it's higher every year. And Lake the same way. I think us and Lake are probably the two that have always paid in. And probably because of this large seasonal as compared to homestead. So we're always, losing on that fiscal capacity. Itasca tends to pay in a lot too. I think they had a good year once, but St. Louis County, they don't include, when this was set up, it doesn't include their downtown and, let's say, Hermantown, those areas of heavy commercial are not included in that. They just included the more rural commercial like ours, so, and their rural areas that have some commercial, Virginia, and, so.
Well, that's very interesting because when we talk with the state about potential assistance for projects, what's often cited is that we have not reached our tax capacity yet. But when you factor in just that tax capacity and the fiscal disparities, that kind of changes how a person could figure that conversation. But okay, well, thank you, Assessor Thompson, as well for being here and helping understand the process and the timeline. And I hope that we can reach out and get some more questions answered. I know you've been receiving a good number of calls and a very busy time of the year. I don't know when it's not busy for you. So I really appreciate the work that you've done, and very impressed with how well you can explain things in the video that's on the website. So thank you for your efforts there. I think without any other questions, we can wrap this up. I know. Oh, is it with the Board of Appeals that we need to keep it open for an hour? But with this meeting, we can close it before that, is my understanding.
I'm not sure what the law is on this meeting. I know for the Board of Appeals, if it doesn't, it has to go until at least 7 PM, or you have to do it on the weekend.
Yep.
Yeah, this one, the only requirement is that it doesn't end before 6.
Well, we made that, so that's, we're in the clear. Can't end before it starts, right?
I would like to offer, if you guys would like, I can take these slides and make a similar video. If you guys would like, then we can post all these slides with a narrative on the website like I did with the last.
Yeah.
That would be
Presentation.
wonderful.
Thank you, great, Bob.
Mm-hmm. Very,
Great.
very, very wonderful, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, well, guess I can ask for a motion to adjourn here.
Motion to approve. Adjournment.
Thank you. Do we have support?
Sullivan supports.
Thank you. A motion support. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. We are adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
So, we look at like our next meeting, then come up with what we're gonna call it already.
Yeah, I mean, we got 2 meetings.
Yeah. Yep.
Figure it out, but